You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, savvy investors out there, man, it's exciting. There's a lot of things you're going to learn today that I didn't know and I'm about to know and learn. Well, one thing is, I don't know if you know this, but my dad is a plumber. So if you didn't know that Robert Van Cowenberg in New Jersey is a plumber, or he was, and then he became a plumbing inspector, which was a really good job. And for a summer and a little bit longer, I worked for a plumber and learned a lot about SHIT and digging it up. I was the lackey when he was like, hey, go, there's things floating, go dig it out. We got to put a new clean out in. Anyway, this great episode today, number 20 of the Savvy Investor Radio Show. Savvy Radio Show, we have a special guest, Todd Feehan. Feehan, all right, from Dad's Plumbing. All right, so I always try to do a quick introduction of how I met Todd. Well, this is extremely unique and probably awesome, and you need to listen to this, and this is how you meet great people. I was at a RIA, and everyone needs a plumber. One day, 1 minute, one time, you're going to need more than a plumber than you think you do. If you think you can change out a faucet, yeah, you're pretty savvy, but reality is there's going to be some major times that you're going to need a plumber. And I would always ask people, who do you use? And Dad's Plumbing would come up. Dad's Plumbing. I would talk to Robert L. Dad's Plumbing. Scott Nucitello. Dad's Plumbing. Everywhere I turned around, Dad's Plumbing. Well, I'm like, Dad's Plumbing. Okay. So I called once or twice and it was a great service. It was a reasonable price. And then one day I was invited to a mastermind group and I actually met the owner of Dad's Plumbing. His name's Todd, super entrepreneur, great guy. And I'm like, we want to know more about you. We want to help his business grow. If you need a plumbing, I'm just going to get it right out the gate. This is not an advertising thing, but you're going to get it. You're going to write this down now, Dad's Plumbing, because you're going to hire this guy or his company, several gentlemen working for him, to grow your business. Anyway, so enough of that. So welcome, Todd, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. That was a really long intro, but I'm not going to talk as much today because I'm already excited for all the cool things that you're going to tell us. First of all, let's just get this out of the way. Why be a plumber?
That's a good question. I personally love it. I love the problem solving, all the times people come to me and they say it can't be done, why other people can't want to be a plumber, that's $1 million question. Not many people do want to be a plumber, so that's why there's a pretty big shortage of such plumbers. But me personally, I love it because I love people. I love resolving issues
and helping them.
Okay, helping out.
So your whole life you wanted to be a plumber?
No, I actually kind of stumbled into it. About 20 years ago, I started out as a maintenance man out in Charlotte, North Carolina. I went out there I've spent most of my life in Oklahoma, but I decided, hey, take my girlfriend, my kid, and go out to North Carolina and
venture off
and just see what life runs into. And I started out in maintenance, and I did that for a while, and I was like, well, then I dabbled in some other things, and life came back around. I come back to Oklahoma, and buddy's like, I was working for Lear at the time, and they were going to shut the doors, and my buddy's like, hey, come do plumbing. I'm like, I've done plumbing before. He goes, no, this is plumbing, not maintenance. And from that point, I've been stuck in it like Chuck. I've loved it, every bit of it.
Cool. So how long have you been doing plumbing now? As a profession? As
a profession, somewhere around in the neighborhood of 15 years.
Cool. All right, so Dad's Plumbing and Drain Service, 405-602-2615. Anyway, that's his number on his shirt. But how'd you come up with Dad's Plumbing, the name?
I've naturally when I started the business, I had to start thinking more of an entrepreneur rather than a plumber, and I really wanted something that said, I'm going to treat you right, and I'm going to be fair, and because I love building relationships, and I dealt with so many moms. I actually initially wanted to call it Mom's Plumbing because we deal with more moms than we do dads, but dads made more sense. Sure. Oddly enough, more moms work on plumbing than dads, but
yeah. Well, it is an emotional attachment. It's like soft.
Yeah.
Dad's Plumbing. And your logo is like kind of a 50s nostalgic.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. All right. So that's cool. So you're an entrepreneur. And then when did you start kind of ramping it up? One day you woke up. Well, first, we'll get into the investors here in a minute, but
Yeah.
so you're a plumber probably by yourself, and then what gave you the desire to grow your business? Obviously, it's a lot more headache. Entrepreneur, you're employing a lot more people, laws, states, drama, code. What was the defining moment where you started, I'm going to grow this deal. I'm going to go big.
It was pretty much right off the get-go. I mean, I thought, it's like, well, I could make an extraordinarily amount of money just by myself, but the times that I needed time for myself, vacation or personally for whatever reason, that meant that from time to time I would have to leave people hanging, and that just really ate at me. So it was pretty much right off the beginning. I was like, how can I make this right and right for as many people as possible? So
Cool.
from the get-go, we shot for a pretty big ceiling.
All right. So you thought that one day you're going to have to take a vacation, and if you don't work, you don't get paid. So you got to figure out how to leverage your time. Mm-hmm. Smart entrepreneur, and he reads too. That's one good thing about that. All right. So let's get into landlords, investors. We have a bad rep. All right. People think that we're just the negotiating, dramatic people. Undercut everybody. We're going to go to hell because we ask for. Is that the best you can do? What's it like working with an investor? Because you have a lot of investor clients that use you religiously. Dad's Plumbing for everything. I use Dad's Plumbing, but how does that go down? Why'd you pick investors? Is that your bulk of your business?
In the earlier start, it was because naturally we were building the business, so we had lower rates, and so that was definitely a lot more attractive. But we did some learning, and we've had our learning curve. But I'd say altogether, and once again, it depends on how you look at it. But I'd say it makes up about half of my business. And if you actually looked at my books, it would look even less than that. But you gotta consider, I consider a bigger range of investors. Like I'm sitting down with a guy that I've done tons of work for in the past. He's buying an apartment complex, and we're real likely to start that in the next week. And I will send a crew out there, and they'll be there for 2 years. It's like it's close to a $500,000 deal. So it's like some people wouldn't exactly consider that an investment deal, but the guy flips apartment complexes on a national level. He technically still, as far as I'm concerned, is an investor, but most investors, I think of themselves like yourself and many other mom and pop shops where they're not turning $1 million deals several times a year. They're doing small houses. So in retrospect, you got to understand there's more than just the small time investor. We do work for large investors, small investors as a whole. All
right. So investors have a bad rep. How do you deal with investors? Do you cut them a rate? How do you give them a discount? Or and how can an investor? I'm asking 100 questions like I'm hitting with bullets here, but let's. Do you like working with investors, obviously?
I do like working for investors, especially the ones that are like-minded, where they're interested in building relationships and stuff like that. I think that those relationships stand to benefit a lot better for both parties when you're doing that, because one, you have a tendency to learn stuff from each other, which helps you save even more money down the road. It also tears down assumptions. The one of the bigger problems with dealing with some investors is they don't know the lingo, and there's assumptions. Well, I thought this was included. That, you know what I mean? And if you have a relationship where it's a little bit more of some kind of kinship, you can sit there and explain things a little bit better without being shy or feeling, I want to say sometimes people feel stupid. I don't think people are stupid. They're just embarrassed to ask questions or not knowing whether it's appropriate or not,
Well, one thing that, I really like about you is like, I have an apartment building, and, I have a guy working for me at the time. He doesn't work for me anymore, but he was a plumber. He said he was licensed, but he, that's another story. Yeah. He had a little card. And we couldn't figure out this drain on this apartment building. And it's a big line. I don't know, 6-inch. I don't know what it is, but they're pretty big. And he's like, you got to go get a turbo flush. It's got to blow it out. And I was like, where do I get that? And so I called you on your cell phone in a panic. I'm like, hey, I need to get a turbo flush. Can I rent that from you? And you said, why would you do that? That's a commercial application. And actually, this apartment building didn't have commercial piping, but you would blow out what you're doing. Like, you would ruin everything. And I was like, man, this guy could have took my money and ran down there and hit the button and tear it up even more. And, sure enough, I go get a video camera. You suggested, hey, won't you go get a video camera and see what's going on? Get a video camera. And it was like 3 feet off the wall, out of the building. And we dug it up, fixed it, and went down the road. But if I would have didn't know you, and I was in a panic because, I had 14 units and 14 people couldn't go to the bathroom, and they were blowing me up and they were pissed off, and we had to correct this situation. And you're the only person I thought of. And I mean, and since then I've been just extremely loyal to you, just because I believe that, and this guy that was doing the job, I believe he was a legitimate plumber. Like, I can tell he had experience, but I think he was just, wanted to give up. And he was like, I've tried everything I can, and boom. But thank God I called you. But that's another thing. A lot of investors come across the most unique situation. I know you're always willing to help. What's another way that you could help investors save money? Because, like, I want to call you for every call, but I have maintenance men that can go out and do some clean outs and stuff and kind of save me some cost. But we talked earlier about maybe what's some other ways, or what's ways that, investors, landlords can get ahead of the curve.
There's several things they can do. First off, it helps out tremendously if they learn the lingo. I mean, just really, because a lot of times, like I said, once again, assumptions. I assume you were talking about this and that. And there's all kinds of little neats and tricks. First off, just so everybody's on the same page, and I've dealt with this for years, good drains don't back up. That's all there is to it. And now the ones that do back up, they back up for two reasons. One is either abuse, or two, something's wrong. And take the time to invest that, because and a lot of times, and this isn't just investors, it's people as a whole, where you go out there and like, look, if this continues to happen, get it cameraed, do this, do that. Usually there's some type of suggested pathway what should be done, especially if it's going to be habitual, because the evidence is not always so clear, you know what I mean? But the one thing's for sure that is clear: if you got a problem that continues to repeat itself, correct it. It's because everything you're doing is generally just a Band-Aid. So you can be bled, be bled out slowly and then get hit with a big ticket on the end, or you can just handle it and just resolve it and not have tenants that are upset and complaining about, why should I pay my rent because you still haven't fixed this and this and that. I think another thing while I think about that is be available. We get a lot of calls where like, yeah, go take care of it, and we go out there and it's a lot more than people assume, and then we can't get a hold of the landlord and to get approval, so we have to shut down. Then there's that minimal cost of being there, and then when we get the approval, we got to start all over again to show up a second trip, which means there's a whole new setup fee and things like that. I mean, be available. I mean, don't give us the secondary, third number of getting a hold of you when we're calling. We're not calling to take you to the dance. We're calling because we need approval or to discuss issues.
Right. All right. So, okay, back to, like, let's say I'm about to buy a property. Do landlords call you, or investors call you and pay you a fee to come check plumbing out? Is that a smart thing to do, or?
Yeah, I think it's a smart thing to do. I think the smarter ones that I've dealt with is properties when they're being purchased. I mean, it doesn't really cost anything. I can a lot of times look at stuff, and I don't charge nothing for it, because I consider it as part of my service, my value, and be like, look, you're going to run into issues with this, and this, and watch that over there. Or, hey, you got looks like a pretty sound house. But I always suggest anytime an investor buys a property to just and to have the equipment and hopefully the clientele to do it, but just snake all the drains. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be fine, but I promise you, it's a lot easier dealing with a property when it's open, it's unvacated, and you're snaking lines. And if you're able to get the cable through the system without problem, the likelihood that you have a major issue starts to diminish. It doesn't mean it guarantees it, but it starts to diminish, because most of the time when we're having problems, it's, hey, I snaked this, I pulled back mud, or I can't get past that spot, I think it's a little bit more important to know that before you get a renter in there, before you start remodeling, before you start all the painting and all that stuff, to simply just do a little bit of preventative maintenance and verification before you start.
So, like, if I purchase a property, I can call you guys, say, hey, I got a vacant property. We're about to start rehabbing this deal. Can you come out for, a normal service call and kind of run things through and the drains? All right, let's talk about code.
Fun stuff.
Yeah. I do a lot of my own basic plumbing. But, I run in a lot of inspectors with this water heater drama. Mm-hmm. I know we talked about that just a little while ago off the studio here, but why do they change code and change it often? And then they do change code, but they don't stick to it. Like we talked about the hammer. What are those things called? Hammer resters. Okay. For a long time, those weren't on there. And then now they're back on there, and now they're required. And then the pop-off valve used to be copper, but then it was, this is Section 8. Then it had to be copper on the pop-off valve. Why do they change things, and then they hold to them, and then they don't? Is it just per inspection per county? How does the code thing work, and how do you hear about it, and how could savvy investors be abreast to it? How can we find out about it? The best way investors to find out is just stay in touch. Try to make a friend with your electrician, your plumber, and stuff like that. And a lot of times with minimal effort, they'll inform you of everything going on. But as far as how it goes, the code is regulated by two things. First, you got your federal code or the federal guidelines, and then you also have the manufacturer's suggested application, because that has a lot of bearing as well. And then once that it gets passed, and it goes by state, which in different states do different code. Like Oklahoma is under the IPC code. Kansas is under UPC. There's different governing bodies, and that's why a lot of times people are like, my cousin is in Arkansas. He knows how to do this, and he says I don't have to. Different states, different codes. In order for it to be the same thing, they would have to be under the same IPC as we are. And like I said, there's several governing bodies. I think there's about 4 or 5, because Oklahoma used to be under BOCA. We're not under BOCA no more. We're under the IPC. So the governing bodies change, everything and this and that. But once again, also technology changes. And in regards to hot water heaters, a lot of people have been frustrated with having to raise them for the last 15 years. Here's the next fun part. They're going back down to the floor. They're getting rid of the risers? Why?
Because since 2006, the technology of those tanks, where it's got a vapor lock system that draws air on the bottom, manufacturers actually been fighting on a national level because people were raising those, which was bypassing the safety setup of how it was set up. So they fought it long enough and won, and now those tanks have to go back down to the floor. So
the riser manufacturer's pissed off.
That's only
$12 or $15, but still.
Well, everybody that paid to have all their water lines and raised and the event shortened, now when they start getting it, they're going to have to extend the vent and drop the lines down back to the floor, because the point is when you raise a gas-fired natural hot water heater and you spill gasoline on the floor, it'll catch fire. But if you put it on the ground with the way they're designed now, you can pour gasoline all around that thing, turn that tank on, and it will not ignite the fumes from the gasoline because of how it draws air into the tank and stuff like that. It's really kind of crazy, but technology is a big part of why these codes are changing. I mean, even the hammer resters we're talking about, a lot of that's coming about because Oklahoma City is increasing water pressure. More houses are required to have pressure-reducing valves and stuff like that are causing floods. And because they're causing floods, that means insurance claims are being filed. So insurance companies are boycotting and paying Congress and this and that, pass these laws. So it's really interesting because it's a world that is so involved with everybody and everything they do, but they don't see it because they don't understand it, and it's just
they just see you, and you're like, it's going to cost you $200 more to lower that water heater.
Exactly, and then they give us all these rules that we have to follow, and if we don't follow it, and someone's unhappy and they report it, then we can have our license investigated, even lost, and that's besides lawsuits or anything else.
Sure.
And nobody wants to lose their license. So, unfortunately, So when we show up, we're simply covering our butt. So if the local code says you got to have hammer resters, an expansion tank, and raised or lowered or this or that, sorry, for me to do it, you're gonna get it. I mean, because I'm governed that way. I have to. So.
All right, here's another question. So one time I was rehabbing a house, and I was putting in a new bathroom, and I put in a manifold. Mm-hmm. And come to find out, the law just recently changed that it has to have like a suppression of the hot side, so it doesn't scald children, apparently. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, there's certain manifolds that have that can't spew out hot water.
Yours sounds like more like an application, but yes, I'm familiar with what you're
on the
talking about.
Okay, so the manifold's in the shower. It's the thing that you turn on and off for those out there. And I just installed one of those, and then the law was changed. How do you I just purchased that item at Lock Supply. Mm-hmm. How do I know if it's up to code or not?
You find out the same way you do. We fail. I mean,
okay.
That's you because
there's no other way around it.
Yeah, because Oklahoma City's one of the best as far as getting that information. Because Bill Jackson, the current head plumbing inspector, who's been the best so far as I'm concerned, he will actually send out emails saying this goes into effect on this date, this goes into effect, and if you're reading your emails, you'll be brought up to date. But the other cities don't do that, and you got to understand there's another portion of the code that no plumber really likes, and it straight says that the code's up to the interpretation of the code official, which means the inspector himself. So if he feels that something should be done a different way, he gets to make that call. It doesn't matter what you as the homeowner think or the plumber thinks. You have to change it. Otherwise, it literally costs thousands to sit there and fight with city because you got to make a case to say why it has to be the way that you did it.
I know exactly what you're saying. I ran into a situation on a property where the one inspector denied it, and then we redid it and redid the inspection. This is an electrical situation, and the guy said no, do it back the other way, and he approved it. So basically undermined the last inspector. Yep. Do you come across that a lot? You know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden,
we come across that a lot with the new inspectors because these new inspectors, when they come out, they're pretty cocky. They're beating their chest and they got to make their name. But it's getting pretty critical because I know that in Oklahoma City, I don't know about the other areas. Once again, unless you're in Norman, Norman's just a tough place to be doing stuff. Period. But Oklahoma City actually does backup inspections. They actually send another inspector that backs up and makes sure the other inspectors are doing what they're supposed to be doing, cool. At least on the plumbing side. And just because an inspector passed something does not mean that the second one can't revoke it. I've actually had that happen. And so it's...
Because inspectors get lazy too.
Yep.
Because they have to be out there at 8 in, pressure up the line. And I swear he didn't, he just slapped a sticker on there,
Yep, but you're never 100% safe. I know it's a little bit off topic, but I actually did an apartment complex not too far from here once, where 6 months after we installed, it was like 80 water heaters. The inspector came in and decided that it did not pass current code. Sorry. And so we had to relocate all of the water heaters, all of them, because he wasn't going to accept them in their current location, even though we had past stickers on every single one of them. They revoked them.
So did you fight that?
Well, I went to the owner on it. And we had to change. We hit him with a change order because what happened was the hot water heaters, like in some apartment complexes, they were under the cabinet. Well, the way the hot water heaters were set in the original design, they were under the cabinet, but next to it was just a cabinet. It was an open cabinet. Well, to maximize their rentals, to get the most amount of money, after we got finals, they sent in their crews and shoved in that open space dishwashers.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And once the dishwasher was installed, it's considered a permanent fixture, which and oddly enough, it's under the fire code. The hot water tank has to have readable access, and to unscrew the dishwasher technically doesn't classify as readable access, so therefore it was failed. So we had to relocate all the water heaters to a closet 30 feet away and repipe it accordingly.
So that's just murder money.
Yeah, it was a very...
That was murder for that poor investor. And I mean, and you're just SOL. I mean, either... I ran into an apartment building where the water heater was in the wall. Like, is that... Have you seen that before?
Well, you can't close them in the wall.
I mean, it was electric, though.
I've seen them in walls before, yeah.
Why?
I see some weird stuff.
Yeah, anyway. Okay, so the life of a plumber. Man, that is an intense story. I just, my heart just broke where that poor investor, pretty much paid the bill, worked his whole budget, probably was over budget, and then just got stung with 80 more units of death.
Yeah.
There goes his cash flow. All right, so let's talk about the future of plumbing. And not everybody wants to be a plumber anymore, and why, and what's happening. And I know you've almost preached on this, the several meetings I went to where I really was like taken by you. I was like, all right, people are retiring and no one's wanting to be a plumber. We're going to have a flux of problems. So let's talk a little about that. Tell me about the statistics that you've been privy to, and blah 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 about what's going to happen to plumbing, and or what's your prediction, and should I hold on to my wallet?
I would definitely. I don't know about hold on to your wallet, but I definitely keep an eye on what's going on. Right now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, by 2020, which is only 5 years, they're calling for an abnormally high increase for the trade at 26%. I personally find that to be low because the other statistic I heard, like we were talking about, was that 57% of all registered plumbers in the U.S. are over the age of 55. That's every apprentice, every contractor, every journeyman, all as a whole are over. I mean, so realistically, you're looking at losing 60% of the industry in the next 7 years, literally. So rates are going to go up, and I'd like to just talk about that for a second. You got to understand, when plumbing's hot, it's hot. When it's not, it's not. We appreciate it when it's not busy. But when it's crazy, people get fanatic. I mean, they're just, I gotta have it. And in all reality, most of us, as far as companies, we watch our complaints, and the complaints we're watching ours. You couldn't get out to me quick enough. And they get, and oddly enough, they get pretty frustrated. I understand, but I mean, and when we get too many of those, we raise the rates, because the reality is believe it or not, more people would it's easier to control your upset customers by raising your rate, because most of them just want it quicker, realistically. And so those that are willing to pay you more to do the same work, I mean, it just works out better, because the ones that are pinching pennies and stuff like that, it's like, well, they're highly susceptible to being like, well, you're pushing me over budget, over this and that, and it's easier to walk away before you ever get started than it is to. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. No. Another thing is, do you think it's society where technology is instantaneous, cell phones and all this stuff, and people want their, Google it up, they want their information now? Do you see that? I mean, you've been doing it for 15 years. Do you see? Is that why the sense of urgency is increased?
No, I think the urgency is just the lack of, once again, plumbers haven't gotten a raise literally since the 80s. I mean, you got to understand, a plumber, and this is kind of funny, so people understand, apples for apples. Plumbers in the 80s, and this is no BS, when the rates were $50 an hour for a decent plumber,
right?
Those guys literally made $1,000 a week.
Right.
Okay?
That's right.
A good plumber right now today makes $1,000 a week.
True. And costs have gone up. Tools, material,
everything, and
housing.
So I mean, don't get me wrong. I wasn't so much. Well, I definitely wasn't plumbing in the 80s. I was still in school, but you gotta. I think some of those guys were stuck on maybe a little bit of some entitlements. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But the reality is this: nobody wants to do it. And feel free to, if you get bored, call. What is that? The Votech in Del City or whatever. They're the only one locally that does plumbing classes, and I heard that they just started their first class in a very long time the other day, because they actually had enough people to have the class. They had enough people join to actually have the class, because the problem with the shortage isn't the pay. I mean, I and some of my buddies and other friends, we pay higher than many other people. We pay close to $30 an hour. I mean, where else are you going to make almost $30 an hour? Never have to go to college, never have a student loan or anything, coming right out of the hopper. I mean, that's a pretty good living. It's gonna
and it's kind of flexible.
Yeah, it's flexible, but it's a good living. But the problem is it is highly laborious. People just until they and you probably test yourself. A lot of people don't understand the amount of labor that goes into the things we do, and you got to be open to all of it. I mean, a lot of people do think, well, I changed out a faucet once. If I could change out faucets all day long, I promise you I wouldn't have problems getting help. The problem is crawling into attics and hand digging
underneath the house.
Keep in mind about on average 10 plumbers a year die because of excavation, cave-ins and stuff like that. I mean, our job actually does kill us. And the reality is nobody wants to do it. I mean, there's no other way to cut it. Nobody wants to do it.
So what does that mean for me as an investor? Should I contact my niece and nephew and try to teach them to be plumbers? Because how am I going to sustain? These people are retiring. What do you suggest? What's going to happen?
I think the best thing for an investor to do is to develop a good relationship with a small company or a growing company. I think that's where I grew a lot of my own popularity in the beginning, was because I was so willing and I was growing. And which is kind of funny, because as some of while I was growing with some of these companies, they would be like, yeah, I used to use this guy, but he's just gotten too expensive, and it's kind of a funny story, because it's like, if the relationship is really matched correctly, shouldn't both businesses grow equally? I mean, you know what I mean? Because you'd want him to grow, because if you're growing your business, that means you're going to have more work. So if you're doing more, well, don't you want him to do the same thing? You know what I mean? There's ways of cutting corners without losing. So
at my age now, I just don't want to think about it. I know when I make a phone call to Dad's Plumbing, I know that I'm going to get the right information. I may not like the price, because it's reality. It needs a new sewer line, and it's in the thousands, and I'm not happy with that. But at least I know the answer.
Yes.
And I think that's the most important thing. I think you're like you said earlier, I don't know if you said it off the radio, but you're shooting in the dark trying to save money. $50 a year, 20. Hire a ghetto guy to go out there, and by the time you're done, you paid the same amount of money, and you went through all that time and stress. Just hire a professional. So let's talk about, how do I hire a professional? Say someone's listening to this in California or New Jersey or wherever. How do you pre-qualify a plumber? Can you? Or, how do I operate?
You can pre-qualify them. I mean, you can do a lot of your typical stuff with checking with the BBB and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of the BBB for personal reasons, but...
you can pay to be on the BBB.
Exactly.
That's the one reason.
That's my problem why I don't like the BBB.
I mean, let's just get it out there.
But I think the easiest way, you don't have to recreate the wheel. I mean, go to people you trust, like-minded people, because they're usually going to give you your best leads. And be like, I have a guy that I use for electrical stuff. I use him in my own house. You know what I mean? And I met him through people that are like-minded, in same financial status and this and that. So that way I'm not, because realistically, I'm not going to use the same electrician as Toby Keith or something like that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I probably can't afford that guy.
It's so true.
But I think the best thing to do is if you're really working your market and utilizing the people in your market, you don't have to go very far. I really don't think you have to go very far at all. And build those relationships. I've saved investors tons of money simply by changing their plans on how they wanted to remodel something. I'm like, why don't you just do this and this? It's less work. You still get the better space, or blah blah blah, whatever it may be.
Right.
And they're like, you know what? That's right. So to me, and that's why it's
a long-term relationship.
Exactly.
I'm loyal. I mean, you've probably saved me thousands of dollars on that apartment. I didn't own an apartment before, and I was like desperate, and I didn't know what to do. And you have that wisdom, and you have that experience, and now I'm like, man, what's the plumber in my mind? you know. And I think it's just because you're serving people and you're helping people, and that's how you're building a relationship. That's how I met you, is through others. I want to be like those other investors. They have hundreds of properties. I'm like, Elder, who do you use? Dad's Plumbing. I mean, obviously he's already paved the way. Why would I want to reinvent the wheel? All right, what other suggestions that you can give? Maybe even a rookie investor that has one rental property and they're on a budget, you know, they're barely making money. Any suggestions for them? Or when they call up there? Or okay, let's talk about this. How do you work pricing, and how do, you know, when they rebel against you? How do you, like, what? You're charging me X amount to do that? I can do that. Have you heard that?
Yeah, we get that, and even though I think most of us will bite our tongue, but really what's going through our mind is why aren't you? I mean, because I think it's a common issue, and it's a fair question too, and my question back to the listeners is why aren't you? I mean, you got to take the core of the base group. It's like, we're paying, most of the stuff we do is not rocket science. Most of what we do can be generally done by the average person. It's just disgusting. It's uncomfortable. It's time consuming, and I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, and that's where sometimes you get bad relationships between customers and tradespeople, and I mean tradespeople as a whole. Is I think they forgot the main reason why they're not doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree, and I think that they don't respect the trade. Like,
exactly.
I thought plumbers were all dumb. No offense, you know, you got the plumber crack.
There's quite a few of them.
You know, but then when I started working for a plumber for a whole summer, digging ditches, and then we were working in a house in Nichols Hills, and he was very meticulous on how, you know, we were putting a drain in this kitchen, this, like, you know, $10,000, $100,000 kitchen, and it had to be perfect on the angle. Because it was, I don't know, I couldn't remember, but I was fascinated by what goes into being a plumber. And after I worked for a summer for that plumber, I realized I have a lot of respect. They're not just cleaning out drains or picking up shit all day. They're really sophisticated gentlemen that are doing a craft. Yeah, it's not too difficult, but it is on certain occasions. And I remember this one plumber too. He was so meticulous that he would make me climb up on the roof to snake out drains because he didn't want to go into the house and tear up their house. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if people understood and respect, and that's why I wanted you on the show, to be honest, to respect and understand what it takes to be a plumber, then we wouldn't have any of this debacle of pricing. I mean, I think you should charge a fair price. I think you do charge a reasonable price. And I don't even want to go over your pricing because it's going to change. Because if I throw out a number right now, blank mouth to, you know, but that's the first question. I get people trying to call me because they know that we have so many units and they want, you know, I'm a good plumber. The first question, well, how much is your service call? And you'd be surprised. Some people have said 150. Some people said 125, 180, 190. I've had someone say 90. Okay. How do people determine their pricing?
Excellent question. The real question is not how much is it. It's what value are you equating to that price? And just as an example, the commercial that's on 5 channels and they do heat and air, and now they're doing plumbing. I don't have to talk about who it is. We all know it. But the reality is they're capturing the I don't want to wait market.
The 1-800 hour plumbing.
Yeah, it's like the right now, and,
sure.
And I don't care what it prices. You know that the price is, and you got to understand when someone's sitting there offering you same day service guaranteed, and they're on 5 different stations, it's going to cost you. Will they get out there? Well, yeah, because
they're going to charge you 3 times.
Exactly, because not everybody's willing to pay 3 times. So it really comes down to what your value is. Now, I've heard that they're still out there. I'm sure there's guys that are $60 an hour. You know what I mean? Yeah, but they're booked out 2 weeks. So reality is where's your limitation? What's your emergency? And I think that's the real question. And if you don't know, you might ask them on the phone. And I would hope to God they know when you ask them that question, because I've worked in offices that don't know. But the reality is the amount charged usually is directly proportionate to how quickly you can get them out. If you knew nothing else about any of the trades and you just knew that one thing, I promise you, you're not going to be too far off base.
So what you're saying is the lower the price, maybe the longer you got to wait. And
Yep.
and I found that just for fun. I'm not a big fan of the pressure test because I buy a lot of properties that have been vacant.
And most plumbers aren't either. We hate them.
Yeah. Well, I know, and I actually have had some really good plumbers teach me how to do it, and then call them. Test the, cut it to the house and test it there. I mean, I've ran into some, but the thing is that just for fun, I started calling in the phone book, and I just started calling the number one question: how much is it for a pressure test? And it was just fascinating. What I would get 320, I would get 250, I would get 280, I would get all. But I noticed and then my next question was, when can you get to it? Yeah. And I noticed, and you're right, the pricing does change with the emergency of it. But it's just still, I want, as an investor, I work with hard budgets and hard money. I want to know a specific number, and that's what frustrates me about plumbing is I don't know the number because it's a variable. It changes. And then when I think that a sewer line's only going to cost $1,500 or $2,000, I get a call for a sewer line for $4,000. And I'm like, where did I go wrong? But that's just the nature of the beast. And you got to, investors out there, just like that poor investor that had 80 units that had to, replumb those 30 feet away or into another closet. You have a budget and don't stick to it because it's going to be 20, 30% bigger. On an average ticket, do you stick with that number? Or do you know if it goes up or down?
But on a bid, usually the reality is this. I mean, most bids are supposed to be bids, and then if you got anything that's outside of that, it's going to be hit on a change order. And the same thing for an estimate. And the key thing is people need to understand the difference between estimates and bids. A bid's a bid, and an estimate's an estimate. An estimate is a generalized cost, and I believe you're allowed to legally fluctuate as much as 15% either way. So,
and no one ever goes down.
Yeah, nobody ever goes down. But when I'm dealing with projects, one of the things that usually causes it to cost more is because, once again, people putting on all these hats. They're doing they're GCing it themselves and stuff, and they don't understand the process. So we're prematurely being called out for this, and then prematurely called out for this, because our goal is to come in and block timing. Where I come in for, like, I'll give you a real example. Tomorrow we're starting a project. We're gonna walk in there. We're gonna rip the floor open. We're gonna move all the plumbing in the walls, in the floor, everything. And when we're done, when we walk out, we won't be back until it's time to literally finish everything. That's after it's been painted, the walls have been up, everything. I mean, the inspection will be done, but we get customers where, like, well, I need you to come back and set a toilet. They don't have a toilet. And so you come back and make a special chip for just the toilet. You know what I mean? Oh, well, the faucet's dripping and it's causing problems over here. I need you to take care of that. I know it's not included. It's like, so you're making a special trip for that. It's like, we want to tackle as many things as possible, and the more we get picked apart on these little bitty things where we're breaking up time, we have to
charge more.
We've got to charge for it. It's got to be compensation for it. Another one that really kills us and drives us nutty is all of our time blocks are done. And I can promise you, and this is something, please take it to heart, everybody that's listening. If you got a project going on, always allow a week to 10 days for your contractor to get set up for it. Being told on Monday morning, I need you to start Tuesday morning, and by the way, I don't really care what's on your schedule. That puts a lot of pressure, and once again, getting it back and forth into people's minds. The more pressure you're put on when you're trying to,
more money it should cost you.
The more it costs you, the more chances you're getting frustrated, or things will get missed or done wrong. Or, I mean, so money all aside, I mean, it's a higher chance for a bad experience. You know what I mean? And that's really what this is about. I mean, in the end, we can make more money back and this and that, but the experience of understanding what's going on in the process, I think you can do a lot of disjustice to yourself, the people, you know what I mean? And that's why I spend so much time just trying to communicate up front,
right,
on all those things.
And that's what a plumber is to solve a problem.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's wrap this up with this last question. All right, so we didn't tell you this beforehand, so we're going to throw it out there. Let's talk about shark bites.
Oh, yes. Shark bites.
So, I run into a guy, I'm a plumber, and he uses shark bites. So we have a rule here. I don't know what to tell you my rule, but we don't use shark bites. We don't believe in them.
Yep.
And what's your thoughts on shark bites?
They have my experience is they have a higher probability of failure.
Especially in a wall.
And every company I personally know, of all the owners I know, it's a company rule is if their employees get caught using them, they will get fired on the spot.
Excellent. That's a great rule, and that's a rule we have here because we do hire some journeymen sometimes, and just to we have so many units, we got to maintain them. And I tell them rule number one, and we've let people go because we've been under a house, and it is hard, and it's uncomfortable, and takes 2 seconds to put a shark bite in. Yep. But we found out that shark bite didn't sustain, and that plumber no longer works for us.
Yep.
And that's one thing, guys out there, investors, that you need to know. Some other friend of mine, an investor, explained that shark bite is this a temporary situation to get a real plumber out there to fix the job, to sweat the pipe, to PEX it, whatever the situation is. Try never ever to use a shark bite
as a
permanent installation. And I was young and dumb. Of course, I have a lot of properties with shark bites in them, and it's just only time. And then I'm gonna have to open the wall up.
Yep. Oh, also, I want to just throw it out there as well. The plumbers using, and this is just FYI, the plumbers using the stainless steel band rings, where it's one crimper can work for like several sizes. It's a stainless steel ring. If you do a little research on the internet, you will find out that I believe there's a class action lawsuit on the manufacturer of those things. So I would tread carefully and suggest using the solid bands. It doesn't matter whether it's the black band or the copper band, but it's a solid band.
The one that it's already pre-sized.
Yeah, it's pre-sized. Yes,
and so it just crimps it down. It's not the one that you cut them. Is that what you're talking about? Tell me about what's the difference between the bands.
Well, it's the bands. It's much like your ring. It's just round. It's bland. It's just they have a
little hump on it, right?
No, there's no hump. It's just a solid ring, and then the tools, you use a different tool for every size. It's got its own tool for each size, and it's round too, and it just crimps that round ring down tighter to a smaller deal. Where the stainless steel version I'm talking to, it's more like a ratcheted, where it pulls two sides of the bands together, and it creates that little tit.
Yeah.
And those bands break. I haven't found it. I've had them break in my own house. I did my own little experiment for almost 3 years, and I couldn't find a common denominator on why they were breaking, where some did, some didn't. And I intentionally went out and used brand new equipment, brand new rings, just to verify it. And yes, and even in my own house, I had those things fail, and I put the things in.
Right.
So
get the right rings with the right sizes and the right tool. So there goes all. You can't use that one PEX tool that does all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can, and it's still legal. It's just they're under heed the warning. They're under a class action lawsuit. So I would suggest if you got the chance, use the other rings, because
start doing that.
Yeah, they're not.
That's a great tip, man. Todd, it's been a great time. I appreciate that last tip out there. Savvy investors that use plumbers, tell them about this class action suit possibility. Google it up. PEX rings. I don't know what they should Google up. Yeah. All right. So Todd, do you have an email, a website, a phone number? I know you like challenges. I love every time I see you have some schematic in your hand, like some unique way to plumb a kitchen. It's just awesome. I love that your passion for plumbing and business, and you are an entrepreneur. And I'm just excited to see where you're going to go in Oklahoma City and maybe even nationwide one day. But can anyone get a hold of you? Is it okay?
Yeah, they can reach us either on the phone, which is 405-602-2615, or they can send us, drop us a line at dads.plumbing@yahoo.com. That's our email. Or feel free to come join us at dadsplumbingokc.com.
dadsplumbingokc.com. All right, party people out there, savvy investors, now you have some education towards plumbing. There's a lot more to learn, and be ready for the future. Thanks, Todd, and have a plumbing day. Flush it.